This is basically how the situation started with regards to the nastiness that went on with my youngest daughter's father's family. They got mad because the my daughter's grandmother decided that she wanted to keep her word. The property didn't belong to them in the first place. The actual person who had owned the property was deceased, and it was left to the heirs. Well, she was with somebody else, and she was not with that man any longer, but she still had children with him. The property went to the children, not to her. And the one of the people's whose name was on it wasn't supposed to be because of the way the situation sat. Well, I didn't know that at the time. We were just doing what we were supposed to because the man was deceased and had his name taken off the property so that we could press forward with what we were trying to do. Well, in the course of that, it made things go back to the original way it was with regards to the ownership of the property. It then became an estate again. Okay, this is my understanding of how this fell. Well, it doesn't matter whose name was on the title. There are bones, indigenous bones that sit on the property that are adjacent to the property. Because of this, I was allowed to lay a claim to it as one of the heirs to those bones. And because it's on indigenous tribal land. These guys do not have an understanding of that there's rights and laws that protect and defend indigenous remains and artifacts, which is what I asserted the right to. So I would have obtained the property anyway. They had no understanding of that. So now this is above them. They don't have anything to do with this part of it. Whoever went through after I filed the papers and approved the title, which is different from the deed. The title is way more important than having a deed in the state of Michigan if you don't know how land laws sit. Well, these guys approved a deed for me that included the original reservation land for the Wannapegs. So I'm sitting here going, let me take let me see if I can use this. And they got really mad because they didn't realize that I was entitled to the property tax free according to the Treaty of 1812. So somebody went back and saw that, and it was written on the title or on the deed. Excuse me. It was written on the deed that was included in that property was the tax exemption. So I was able to obtain that as an actual heir to these remains. So we're all on the same page. These people got mad because they didn't realize that had already been resolved and that there was a mortgage relief because of it. So they didn't have to pay this mortgage back. They just were allowed to access the property. Well, when the property was shut down due to the gas leak and everybody was forced to leave, the only person that would have been allowed back on the property would have been me. And that's because of the indigenous bones that sit there. These guys are not related to those bones, so they don't have a right to them. They continue to try to use my daughter in order to hold on to this property. What's really sad is that the property was allowed to dilapidate in the process of this, and it's just sat there. It's not even being used. So I said, how about we turn it into a museum? I don't necessarily have to have the property, and the way these guys behaved about it, I don't want to live there anyway. Our original purpose in obtaining the rights to the property was to help the brother who was being abused and neglected by the people who were handling his money. So this was the real issue involved in the situation here. Rather than do the right thing, these guys decided to put me and my daughter in the middle of something that we just didn't have anything to do with other than claiming the remains to my family's bones so that we're all on the same page here. And so these guys had an issue long before I ever came onto the scene. As teenagers, they were already destroying the headstones and the some of the important artifacts that went along with this graveyard so that they could try to keep the land. Now, these guys were teenagers, and again, I hadn't been anywhere near any of that, so I didn't know any of that occurred until the mother, who's my daughter's grandmother biologically, came back and told me that they destroyed it, the graveyard, the headstones, and that they were very angry that the property had to be returned. And so this is basically the situation as it sits. And rather than face that and letting go, because my intent was not to keep them from it, my intent was to restore the property so that we all could enjoy it because it's indigenous tribal land. But these guys were so selfish and they were behaved so petty that they ruined it for everybody. And so I want to explain my side because it really doesn't matter what happened. I just feel it's important to tell the truth so that we all have an understanding. I'm not the one who was keeping things from people. These guys got mad because they didn't want to hand over indigenous bones, being selfish. I don't have any control over that. Not over their selfishness. With God's love, we were just trying to get our bones back. And there's nothing wrong with that. They're supposed to be respectful. They claim to be indigenous from Tennessee. Well, in the course of that, aren't you supposed to honor indigenous custom, which says that if you have something that belongs to another indigenous, you're supposed to return it happily, knowing that in the end, the Creator, our God, will bless you for that. But these guys don't want to do that. They want to fight and be nasty. That goes against everything that the true indigenous believe in. So it makes us a little upset. With God's love, we're supposed to be. How would you feel if it was your family's remains? With God's love. God bless America. Have a blessed day and back the badge.